The tent that toppled a tyrant, the spark of defiance. It all started with a tent, a book, and a cup of Earl Grey tea. 6 months after my divorce, I was a software engineer working from home, buried under deadlines and craving peace. My backyard, with its serene lake, seemed like the perfect escape. I set up a small 2-person tent, a folding chair, and a tiny camp stove to brew my tea, a simple setup for reading The Hobbit without the constant ping of work notifications. Pure tranquility. Right? Wrong. My neighbor, Harold, a retired engineer, watched from his kitchen window. His son, Jake, had been kicked out of our neighborhood last year for a minor parking violation, forced to live in Harold's basement at 25 because he couldn't afford his own place. Harold later told me he thought, poor guy just wants some quiet. Victoria's going to lose it. Victoria Martinez, our HOA president, was a 62-year-old force of nature with perfectly styled gray hair and an unshakable belief in her own authority. She stormed across my lawn like a general leading an assault. "You cannot camp on residential property," she declared before even reaching me. I looked up, confused. "It's my backyard, Victoria. It's just a tent." But she was already in full Karen mode, ranting about fire hazards and zoning violations. For a fleeting moment, her voice softened. "I've seen what happens when people don't follow rules. I lost my first house because I didn't understand the law." Then, snapping back to aggression, she pointed at my tiny stove and called it an unauthorized structure with open flames. Before I could respond, she was on the phone with 911 reporting illegal camping with dangerous fire hazards. I sat there, teacup in hand, wondering if I'd slipped into a world where reading by a lake was a crime. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers clearly familiar with Victoria's antics arrived. They took one look at my setup, barely containing their laughter. Officer Martinez asked, "Sir, do you need help taking down your library?" His partner chuckled. They confirmed I was on my own property and left, muttering about Victoria's third call this month. The next morning, a certified letter arrived, a $250 fine for aesthetic violation of community standards. Staring at that number, something shifted inside me. I'd been avoiding conflict, but Victoria had made this personal. I folded the letter and said to my empty kitchen, "Game on. Comment tent if you've ever been fined for something absurd." The secret weapon, Harold, showed up that evening with lasagna and a cardboard box that had been gathering dust for decades. "My wife made extra," he said, but we both knew why he was there. Over dinner on my porch, he shared his story. Jake's parking violation had led to his eviction, a punishment Victoria enforced ruthlessly. "I've been waiting for someone to stand up to her," Harold said, handing me the box. "These are the original HOA documents from the 1980s. My dad was on the first board before. Victoria turned this place into her kingdom. There's stuff in here she doesn't want anyone to see." At the next HOA meeting, Victoria presided like a judge in her personal courtroom, complete with a gavel she'd bought online. The room felt like a tribunal, with me as the defendant. I argued my case: property rights, reasonable use, no harm done, but Victoria interrupted with her gavel, declaring I was disrupting community harmony. Then, unexpectedly, board member Janet Patterson spoke up. "Victoria, I think we need to consider if this punishment fits the crime." He was reading in his backyard. Victoria's face flushed. "I won't let this community fall into chaos like my old neighborhood," she snapped, revealing a glimpse of her past trauma. Without real discussion, she pushed through Regulation 15B. No temporary structures without 30-day advance approval. The vote was 3-2, with Janet dissenting. After the meeting, Harold lingered. "Pay attention to the 1987 property surveys in that box," he whispered. My dad said there was something weird about how the roads were handled. I drove home, the box on my passenger seat, feeling railroaded but intrigued. Victoria's system had vulnerabilities, and I was about to find them. Comment documents. If you think HOAs have too much power, the hidden loophole. At 11 p.m., fueled by coffee, I spread the 1980s documents across my dining table. Most were mundane property lines, utility easements, but a 1987 subdivision plat map stopped me cold. Morning Dew Lane, The main road to every house in Lakewood Estates was highlighted with a note, "Private road, ownership transfer pending." Not under city jurisdiction, my engineer brain raced. This road didn't belong to anyone. I dug into online property records and confirmed it. The developer had planned to deed Morning Dew Lane to the city in 1988, but bankruptcy derailed the transfer. For 35 years, everyone assumed the city owned it, but it was unclaimed private property. I called Sarah Wilson, a real estate attorney. At 11:30 p.m., "Sarah, I found something that's either going to make me rich or get me sued." After reviewing the documents, she was wide awake. "Marcus, you can buy this road through a quiet title action. It's abandoned property." Sarah estimated its value. Morning Dew Lane was the only access to 50 acres of undeveloped lakefront property behind our neighborhood, rumored to be eyed for resort development. "This could be significant," she said. I stayed up until 3 a.m. researching property law. Victoria had used HOA rules to control me, but I'd found a legal exploit that could flip her entire system. Comment checkmate. If you saw this twist coming, Victoria's counterattack. Victoria's paranoia intensified. Harold, my unofficial spy, reported she was calling her lawyer, asking about disruptive residents. To test her, I placed 3 khaki pink flamingos in my front yard. She appeared that afternoon, fuming. "Those decorations are inappropriate," she declared. I calmly replied, "They're on my property, and there's no rule against flamingos." Her eye twitched. Harold overheard her planning something big. She called an emergency board meeting, labeling me a repeat offender, disrupting the community. Victoria had turned neighbors against me. Mrs. Peterson avoided my wave. The mailman mentioned legal troubles, and landscapers watched me closely. At the meeting, Victoria accused me of conspiring against the neighborhood, presenting a resolution to place a $3,847 lien on my property for repeated violations and legal fees. The vote passed 3-2 despite Janet's objections. The lien notice arrived 2 days later, freezing my ability to sell or refinance my house. My hands shook as I called Sarah. "They've trapped me," I said. "The plan is dead." Sarah was firm. "Don't do anything until I review this." Harold brought bourbon that evening, reporting that even Victoria's supporters questioned her overreach. Sitting in my tent, I considered giving up removing the flamingos, paying the fine, fading into compliance. But Harold's words echoed. My son asked why I never stood up to her. I was waiting for the right moment. "This was mine." Comment, "Fight back if you'd keep fighting, or give up if you'd surrender." Turning the table, Sarah worked overnight, finding Victoria's fatal mistake. The HO lacked due process for the lien. "We're demanding its removal," she said, "and if they don't comply, we'll sue every board member personally." The pressure was intense. Victoria drove by, glaring at my flamingos. The bank called about my mortgage. Harold reported the neighborhood splitting. Janet was rallying residents, warning that the lien set a dangerous precedent. At the 48-hour mark, an emergency board meeting shifted the tide. Janet, now confident, declared, "We're neighbors, not dictators. This lien is an abuse." The vote to remove it passed 3-2. With the lien gone, Sarah filed the quiet title paperwork. At 4:47 p.m. on Friday, I received the email. I was the legal owner of Morning Dew Lane. I sat in my car outside the courthouse, holding the deed. I own the road every resident, including Victoria, needed to reach their homes. Harold grinned when I showed him. "You flipped the power structure. Victoria needs you now." She had no idea yet, thinking she'd won by removing the lien. That weekend, I sat in my tent, planning my next move. Comment revenge if you're ready for what's next. The public reveal. Victoria organized a community cleanup day to showcase her leadership. At 10 a.m., I approached, manila folder in hand. "Morning, everyone," I said. Victoria's smile tightened. "I'm glad you're participating, Mr. Marcus," she sneered. I opened the folder. "As of yesterday, I own Morning Dew Lane, the road you're standing on." Silence. Victoria's clipboard hit the asphalt. "That's impossible," she asked ERED. I showed the deed, notarized and filed. "It's been abandoned property for 35 years. Victoria called 911 claiming I was disrupting with false legal claims. Officers Martinez and Johnson arrived, verified the deed, and told the crowd, "You're on his private property." Victoria's authority crumbled as residents left. Her cleanup event in shambles. By afternoon, I'd arranged concrete barriers and private property signs, blocking vehicle access. Cars backed up, neighbors panicked. Victoria stood at the barrier, clutching her clipboard, her world collapsing. Harold called Jake. Justice just arrived in a pickup truck. The symmetry was perfect. Victoria's legal. Bullying had backfired. Comment blocked. If you think this was justified. The final checkmate. A week later, I installed a wrought iron gate with an intercom and cameras labeled Morning Dew Lane, private, road access by appointment only. Every evening at 6:15 p.m., Victoria stopped at the gate, glaring at the intercom before requesting access. I'd reply, "Good evening, Victoria. Do you have an appointment?" On Thursday, she broke, sobbing through the intercom. "I just wanted to protect everyone. I lost my house 12 years ago and swore it wouldn't happen again. I felt unexpected. Sympathy. You can come through," I said. "Tomorrow we talk." The next morning, Sarah called, barely containing excitement. Sunrise Resort Development offered $2.5 million for Morning Dew Lane, the only access to 50 acres of lakefront property they needed for a luxury eco-resort. The deal included permanent access for residents. I signed the papers in my tent, turning a $5,000 legal investment into a millionaire's payout. Victoria's obsession with control had led me to this windfall. That evening, Victoria brought an apple pie. "I owe you an apology," she said by the lake. "Thank you for teaching me that protecting people means letting them be free." I ensured the deal guaranteed road access for all and created a community fund to help struggling neighbors. Victoria stepped down as HOA president. Harold took over, promising democracy. Jake got his own apartment. The resort boosted property values and jobs. My tent stayed, now with a plaque. Sometimes the smallest defiance leads to the biggest change. Comment tent power if this inspired you to stand up for yourself. Epilogue. What did we learn? Maybe nothing, but it was one hell of a ride. A $20 tent turned into a $2.5 million lesson in property rights, toppling a tyrant who thought she was untouchable.